My name is Shelley Wright. The original incident happened at the Royal United Hospital, Bath, England on the 13th of November 2017, where I deteriorated to having a cardiac arrest despite telling staff for an hour that I was bleeding badly. This series of letters were part of my PTSD therapy to help process the events of the day and what has happened since. They were written at the suggestion of the psychologist at the RUH, Mike Osborn. It shows that it's not just a traumatic event that is important, but how things are handled afterwards. I have wanted and needed to write this for a long time. I just couldn't get the wording right, and there was something that I was just not sure about. As you know, I recently tried to end this situation with the charity Resolve West in Bristol as a way of getting everyone involved to find a peaceful solution. Imagine how I felt at the first meeting when I heard you would not attend and I had to say it would not work without your presence. Why would a psychologist not want to help with the healing process? The first meeting I attended with my partner lasted for 4 hours with 2 members of staff. It was such a relief to get everything out to people who were independent from the RUH, and I felt listened to for the first time since the original incident. I still have a huge problem with anger outbursts from the PTSD and explained this problem fully to the staff and was completely open. I said I would need an escape route to be able to leave the room and that I would be loud and there would be swearing, and indicated what could trigger an attack. I even told them which 2 words I would use because they're always the same. I told them there was no danger, I just needed to be alone. It was not pleasant for me during an attack, and it's not pleasant for others to see or hear. I was told I was in a safe place if it happened, and was told where to go if needed. I waited for weeks for the next stage, and received a phone call out of the blue from one of the original staff, telling me I was needed in Bristol in 5 days' time. I asked if a meeting had been arranged, but I was told no. I said I could come, but I would be alone, and I asked what the hurry was, but got no reply. She left me with a statement, and when I asked a question, she just said we could discuss it on my arrival. I said, "So you're going to leave me angry for days now?" Was that the desired effect? They knew that I had a long way to travel and would be tired and angry because of the comment, and they knew that I would have no support with me. When I arrived, the same 2 staff were there, and they again assured me I was in a safe place and told me which door to go out if need be. The atmosphere felt unpleasant and confrontational. They could see I was tired and angry. Why was I called down in a hurry? Nothing was arranged, and there appeared no likelihood of it. I almost made it to the end of the meeting, but suddenly got overwhelmed and had to leave the room, and shouted and swore in the corridor, and was left crying and shaking in the stairwell. One of the women came out. I said, "Do you think the way you've brought me here today, knowing I would be tired and angry, and the way you've conducted this meeting is okay?" At least she had the good grace to look at the ground and say no. I then said, "Mike should never have taken me on, should he?" And she said, "No, probably not." I then said, "Because he was involved with the others before he ever saw me, wasn't he?" And she answered, "Yes." How was it that you would share that with strangers, but you would never be honest with me? I guess she thought they were statements, but they were questions blurted out in the heat of the moment. When I heard these answers from someone not connected to the incident, nor to the hospital, the relief and the release was instantaneous. When I was calm enough, I went back into the room. The older of the 2 women looked at me and laughed. She didn't just laugh, she was chuckling, and she was chuckling so hard her shoulders were going up and down. I said, "Why are you laughing at me?" She made no reply. The flash of anger had subsided on the stairs, and I was just crying before I got back to the office. Why would you want to do that to someone who is distressed? From behind the flimsy door that had been closed, 2 managers then appeared. There was no point in carrying on, as they clearly did not want to help with the meeting. I walked down the stairs and out into the car park. I just wanted to leave, but both women followed me and continued to talk as I went to get my bike from the car park. I hadn't wanted to say any more, but they kept talking. One of the managers came over and told me I had to remove myself from the premises immediately. So there I was, made to stand on the pavement, still in tears, still distressed, and then completely humiliated by my eviction. I have never been told to leave anywhere in my entire life. As I cycled away, I realised that something inside had changed, a kind of calmness. That night I had my first peaceful rest in over 2 years, and then I was able to write this letter. Its delivery has also been delayed due to COVID-19. Dear Mike, these are my thoughts, feelings and observations of my journey. Was any of our relationship real? Was any of it truthful? Did you start out wanting to help and then realise somewhere along the way that you couldn't help, or you just didn't want to help? After the first time we met, it was such a relief to finally get everything out. I went home and said, he's really easy to talk to. I know I'm going to be all right. How wrong I was going to be. How did it feel when you met me weeks after the event and I recounted to you in detail every second of my hour of terror? You said you'd never met anyone who'd recounted a traumatic event so vividly, so long after it had happened. How did you feel knowing that I'd not been seen and had been left with no support while staff had had your support? You couldn't be there for both sides, Mike. You couldn't be there for all of us. Was there anywhere along the way that you thought morally, ethically, professionally that this wasn't okay? Is that why Tracy Miles didn't refer me to you? Because she knew that you would be compromised, because you'd already been involved with the staff responsible? I asked you why. You shrugged your shoulders in reply. So I was left to suffer even longer just so your colleagues would be okay. Was I the only one not supposed to be in on the secret? Did everyone think that because I'd sat so still and quietly for an hour between pleading for them to act, that I was just a bit anxious and it wasn't a big deal? Did they think that because I'd had a cardiac arrest, an anaesthetic and then ended up in ITU, that I wouldn't remember anything? Or is it just so commonplace for things to go wrong in theatre that no one thinks it's a problem anymore? However did you think it was going to work? Did you think we'd just have a few sessions of rapid eye movement and then everyone in the complaints meeting would have been truthful and things would have been put in place so that I felt those after me would be safe and we could all go home and forget it and I would be none the wiser of your involvement? Unfortunately, you didn't bank on everyone in the complaints meeting being untruthful and me then getting my medical records and finding out that nothing had been written about the incident, that the letter to my GP was untruthful and that the anaesthetic chart appeared altered after the meeting. You asked why I made the complaint and said, because if I'd been a member of the public, I would have just said thanks for saving my life. Was that a question from you, or did someone else want the answer? It seemed odd as you already heard me recount an hour of terror in vivid detail and knew that I had complained not just for me, but to ensure it never happened to anyone else. You hadn't realised how principled I am and that I would not and could not let it go. You said I was the most principled person you had ever met. It's a shame I can't feel the same about you. Did I end up getting punished for my principles? When I showed you my medical records and said, did they really think after their performance in the complaints meeting that I wouldn't ask for my records? You said, no, they didn't. And it wasn't a, no, they probably didn't. It was, no, they didn't, and now they know that you found out. So you had obviously discussed it with someone involved. How did it feel when I showed you exactly what was wrong? the mistakes, the omissions and untruths made by people who are your friends and your colleagues and the trust you worked for? Did it sit okay with you? Did you at any time think, is this really all right? In just our second meeting, you said something to me. It's not just what you said, it's how you said it. I asked if you knew what had happened to me and if you'd been involved with the staff. Without missing a beat, you just said, no, you were just seeing me. You knew something had happened, but you didn't know the details. Already I had doubts. Did you not think at all that you could have said that you did know, and you could have asked me if I wanted to stay under your care, or whether I wanted you to help me find someone else away from the RUH? How differently things might have been if only you had been candid. Early on, I asked you why I was so affected by what had happened. You said because I'd had a late referral, the event was preventable, my colleagues had done it to me, and there was no resolution from the complaints. I also said, I don't want to be permanently damaged by this, when the complaints procedure was not going well. But I could already feel I was changing, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop it. Everything that had and was happening was just wrong on so many levels, and so against what I believed was okay. Did you already know that I would become so damaged? Did you already know that no one would be truthful? Did I ever need to be so unwell? Did anyone ever tell you what PTSD feels like? For me, every day and every night for months, I was living life at 200 miles an hour. I got through each day by both the skin of my teeth and the seat of my pants. It was like being on a zip wire high up in the clouds, on a journey that never ended no matter how much I wanted it to. It was 100% exhilaration coiled around 100% of terror. I knew if I ever let go, I'd never get up, but the exhilaration was almost addictive and I could just not let go. I was watchful all the time. No one was going to get anywhere near me to harm me, but I had to make sure that if I saw anyone else being harmed, that I would intervene as well. Did anyone ever tell you what anger feels like? When a major attack was going to happen, there was a loud roar that started in the pit of my abdomen. I sounded like a wild animal. When I told you this, you said it was visceral. I felt like I was turning into the Incredible Hulk, then shouting, screaming, swearing and hitting out. I would erupt like a volcano, and still there is nothing I can do about it until all the pressure is released and the lava has flowed. I was just a seething ball of anger, then sitting for hours in silence, completely drained, emotionless. Did you ever take on board how potentially dangerous I was? How dangerous I felt? Do you know how it feels every day to try so hard to look normal, to sound normal and to act normal, but knowing inside you're not? With anxiety levels so high, it feels like you are permanently wired to the mains, and every time someone lied or didn't help when they could have, it just sent another jolt through, increasing the voltage. To be someone who everyone trusts, believes in, who everyone is relieved to see appear on a busy shift, who has every word listened to and whose opinion is respected. To then be someone not listened to and to be wary of just because you speak too loud, too quickly, too emotionally. People thinking they don't have to take you seriously and they can get away with things just because you're mentally unwell, and no one will believe you next to a sane person. To have all of that taken away, to be completely isolated. How it is when you are the most observant person you know, and that observancy is magnified so I cannot forget anything. To be your own expert witness and know you are right, but no one will do anything because you are mentally unwell. Just because I have PTSD, it doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean I'm crazy. It doesn't mean I don't know what's going on. It just means I have PTSD. After what happened in the complaints meeting, I asked to have my care transferred twice because I felt unsafe and trusted no one in the RUH. You knew that I had asked Tracy Miles and my consultant, and you knew the reason why. Why didn't you intervene? These weren't just strangers. Both were close team members, and you could have spoken up for me. You knew exactly how I felt and the intensity of my feelings, and you knew I had to be in hospital for another 6 months. Maybe you did try, or did you also enjoy watching the agony? This may seem strange to ask, but I cannot understand why you would sit and watch someone suffer. You saw and listened to me week after week, and were the only one with the psychological knowledge to know how damaging it was. I had entrusted my care to you. Week after week we just discussed the same things over and over, and that was, why would no one apologise, and why would no one be truthful? We just never got anywhere. When you knew that nothing was working, why didn't you refer me to someone else? Isn't there anything in your code of conduct that says if someone isn't getting better, then to refer elsewhere? All you said every week was read books, exercise gently, commune with nature, but you knew it wasn't helping. Why was there no other strategy? Did you keep me because you felt sorry for me? Because you didn't want anyone outside of the RUH to know? Or did you hope that someone eventually would be truthful if you kept me on? Or did you just enjoy watching the agony? It may seem strange to ask, but I can't understand why you would sit and watch the distress every week, knowing there was no improvement in nearly a year. Along the way I said to Tracy Miles, and then to Rachel Scott, the now head of complaints, look, if I've got this wrong, if I've got anything wrong at all, please just let me know. They just both stared at me and said nothing. Then one day I said it to you. You stared at me for a long time. I really thought that you were finally going to be honest. It was excruciating. Then you said, you're going to have to ask someone else that. And it wasn't, you're going to have to ask someone else because I just don't know. It was, you're going to have to ask someone else because if I start to tell you, you'll know that I've known all along. Maybe I should have been more demonstrative, and you would have told me. Maybe one day before I came into one of our meetings, I should not have exercised to get rid of the anger. Then if I'd let rip, maybe you would have truly understood the extent of my PTSD. But that would also have given you the excuse to throw me out. Do you not think that if I'd got anything wrong and you knew that, you could have put my mind at rest? If I was saying things about your friends and colleagues that you knew weren't true, or you knew I was mistaken, you also could have spoken up. And if I hadn't have got anything wrong, and you knew this, and you could see how it was destroying me, don't you think you owed it to all of us to tell the truth? Is that why Tracy Miles ditched me partway through my treatment? Because she thought she might end up telling me the truth, but she felt she had to protect her colleagues. I then spent the rest of my hard journey alone. We discussed books a lot because of the amount I read. There's so much comfort, knowledge and inspiration to be found. How did it feel when we were discussing the Harry Potter books about loyalty, friendships, right and wrong, but above all about honesty and integrity? And I misquoted Dumbledore. It was when he said to Harry, "Time to do what is right, not what is easy." Did you ever take that on board? If I read 1,000 more books in my lifetime, I'd never find a better line. It just says exactly what I needed to say and was a brilliant line by J.K. Rowling. I should also have added the other line, when Dumbledore awards house points to Neville, because it takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. How did it feel when I said to you, I've always believed that those who stand around and do nothing when they know something is wrong are worse than the original perpetrators? You referred to it afterwards. Could you then not tell me because you thought I wouldn't listen? Because my standards and principles are so high, you thought I wouldn't hear you? Why didn't I leave? Mentally, I wasn't able to. I was so blown away by what had happened. And I guess subconsciously I hoped that after watching all my suffering, you would be the one to end it. Why is it so hard for people just to be truthful? Just before the end of treatment, Tracy Miles arranged for me to see Nick Johnson because she knew I was struggling without answers. You asked to come. Was that to support me, or did you want to make sure you weren't compromised by anything that was said? I showed Nick Johnson that the letter he wrote to my GP was untrue, and he agreed. You listened when he said, "Why haven't complaints sorted this out yet? Everyone involved knows your cardiac arrest was due to blood loss." I asked him to amend the letter. He took a photo and said he would, and then I asked you both to go to complaints and end it for me. Did you go? Did you speak up for me? Did you check to see if he had amended my records, or did you just think I was leaving and you wouldn't see me again, so you didn't have to do anything? After 6 months, my outpatients appointments were finished. My partner and I headed off to Scotland in a van for a few weeks of rest. I was already so concerned about my angry outbursts that I asked you for a letter to carry with me in case police were involved, and you did this. We saw so many wonderful things. It was so peaceful with so few people about, but there was far too much time to think, and my anger increased and things started to drastically deteriorate. It wasn't really about the original incident anymore. It was about all the lies afterwards. Everyone who stood by when they knew it was wrong. The walls of silence. I had sent you an email when I got back telling you what had happened and saying I needed your help. I'd never wanted to be back in the RUH, but had no choice. I described the worsening outburst, the screaming, swearing, lashing out. I have no idea how I never got arrested. Hours of sitting in silence, emotionally exhausted. We'd be out in the middle of nowhere with no obvious triggers, and I would just spontaneously combust. I felt so dangerous. I tried to combat this, and I was exercising more and more and eating less. I would try to read and to keep calm, but only the exercise worked. Things spiralled, and I was cycling over 300 miles a week and walking over 40 miles. I only needed to be back at the RUH for one more checkup, and when that had not been arranged as promised by Tracy Miles, I had a complete meltdown. I still don't know how I didn't kill both myself and my partner when driving back down the country during an attack. I dropped my partner off with relatives and left. You knew before you saw me that my relationship was in ruins, the anger was out of control, and my weight was down. You knew I wasn't working and was living alone, isolated in my van, sleeping rough. I was in a desperate state, and I really needed your help. How did it feel when you got the email, when you probably thought you wouldn't have to see me again? Did your heart sink? I had told no one I knew what had happened, and you knew my hour with you was all I had all week. Before I'd gone away, I'd already lost 23 kilograms, and during the few weeks I was in Scotland, I lost another 18 kilograms. When you came out to find me in the waiting room, you didn't even recognise me, and I had to stand up so you could see me. How did it feel to watch that pathetic, tired, miserable bag of bones drag itself into the office? Was there no compassion? Was there no humanity? How did you do it? You watched and listened to my turmoil and agony. You watched and listened to the complete destruction of my belief systems, the complete destruction of my nursing soul, the destruction of my long-term relationship. You watched and listened to my sobbing, and still you did nothing. How did you manage to just lay back in your chair completely impassive? You had the answers, or you could have helped me to get them, but you just sat there. Why did you just continue to let it happen? When I decided not to continue with the Ombudsman, I was due to see you in a couple of days, so I did not email. But when I walked in, you already knew. How? It was no one's business to tell you but mine. Again, no neutrality. I did say a couple of times it was okay to speak to complaints, but only for specific things, but you seemed to be there a lot. Was it for my benefit or your colleagues? Every week I waited in the corridor for you because I couldn't bear to sit down in the place. You could see my agony. The whole time you never comforted me, never touched my hand or shoulder, no words of comfort. You never even passed me a tissue during the worst of my crying. For months I lived in my van, consumed with the need to exercise, reading anything and everything to put my mind elsewhere. I could pound along for 5 miles with beautiful surroundings in nature, and I couldn't tell you a single thing I'd seen. Nothing registered. I just needed to get my quota of exercise in. I'd be up at night as I got little sleep, and there was little chance of confrontation. I was up before dawn in freezing weather just to get some relief, and still all the time trying to appear normal, trying to work. I'd suddenly realised that I hadn't had anything to eat in more than 24 hours. Every single normal emotion was dampened or had just gone away. I was left with only anger. Maybe I'm doing you a great disservice. Maybe you did try to help. Maybe you were told not to help. I don't know. It was almost a whole year since the incident until you suggested I write a letter to each person involved, prompted by Tracy Miles stopping me on the cycle path. Even though I really needed to do it, I was still reticent, and we discussed it a lot. I knew each one would be powerful and tough to read, and continually asked you if you thought it was okay. I asked if you thought people would read them, and you said yes. When I started the first one, it was such a relief, and then the others flowed over the next couple of weeks. It was a massive relief to get it all written down. You saw this and said we should have done it much sooner. It's standard practice well known to relieve PTSD, so why did we wait so long? Did you tell those I wrote the letters to you'd advise me to, or did they just think I was being nasty and vindictive? I asked if it was okay to deliver them as well, and you said yes, so I did. Tracy Miles and Nick Johnson into their reception area, and then I plucked up the courage to go to Ward B32 and give the letter directly to Deborah Marian. I was shaking the whole time. I did it just before our meeting, and then told you. I said that when I gave her the letter and told her who I was, she seemed that she was expecting it to happen. Was she expecting it to happen because you told her? Did you tell her a letter would be arriving? Was that why you were so distracted in our meeting? Because you were worrying about her? I asked if you thought people would read them, and you said yes. But did you tell them not to? I've been told that no one knows the questions I have. Is this because they never read the letters, even though you know how important it was for my peace? You said Tracy Miles was going to reply, but she never did. I wonder why. We discussed my frustration with the situation at length, and about making a stand outside of the hospital. I didn't want to protest, but felt there was no other way, and you told complaints it was going to happen. When I was about to start my protest outside the RUH, I texted you to say I was there. Dawn was only just breaking, and I hadn't told anyone the date I'd planned it, even though you had asked me. I had just dropped off the final PTSD letter for Dr. Howells and asked you to deliver it as you had previously promised to do. You text back to say you would. I wonder if you did. Within minutes you came out to see me. You said, "Hi, are you okay?" You said you lived nearby and you were on your way for a dental appointment, but you came from within the main entrance and went back in the same way. It was such a stupid excuse and far too early for a dental appointment. What it actually said to me was, "Hi, I just want you to know I'm here for my friends and colleagues and the RUH. It was the last time I ever saw you. I want you to know that if I sat with an open dictionary for a whole year, I still could not find the words to convey to you how that felt." There was no point in carrying on seeing you after that. The small amount of trust I had in you had gone. I never did see anyone else, although I know I need to. I couldn't manage to relate the whole story again, and who would want to see me when I would need to say that I feel a lot of the damage was caused by my previous psychologist. We talked at great length about the erosion of trust, and that when you lose my trust, you never get it back. For me, Mike, that wasn't just about you, it was about the entire profession. I still have no trust in anyone, and I have no idea what to do in the future should I ever need another anaesthetic or operation. I am now someone completely different. I know this, and I have no idea of how to get me back. Even now I put things in place every day to try to prevent the anger from welling up, and all because a handful of people in my whole life would just not be truthful. I avoid going to places, have changed jobs, and exercise when no one else is around. I've tried not exercising, but then the day doesn't pan out well. It may well all be psychological, but I cannot take the risk. Now the anger attacks are not so frequent and not so long-lived, but they are less predictable and very nasty. And that's a heavy burden to bear. I know that I still have the potential to cause real damage, and if I should ever end up in court, you're the only one who truly knows what this experience has done to me. And would you stand up in my defence, or would you just let me hang? Even now, if I feel trapped, threatened or endangered, I will react quickly and forcefully, and I will do the same if I see it happening to someone else, regardless of whether I know them or not. There's no thought of danger or the consequences, and even afterwards, when I've registered the danger, I'm not bothered by it. Why didn't you write to my GP? Is it that you want to keep it yourself, so no one else you might help will be able to? The improvements made have been down to my partner and I doing things by trial and error. I'm given a lot of leeway. I avoid things, people, places that will trigger an outburst, doing the best we can with no knowledge and finding what works for us. Remember, there is a partner completely damaged by this as well. You above everyone else know the only way I can have peace and closure is for those involved to be honest, and that includes you. We spoke about it every week for months, so I don't know how you can sit there saying you hope I'm well and can find peace. I've thought hard about everything that happened and which part was the worst. The terror, the anger, being lied to, the destruction of my belief systems, still being able to recall everything, but really the betrayal by my colleagues is what really hurts, and that includes all of you. I wasn't a random patient. I was your colleague. Do any of you think that a patient deteriorating to a cardiac arrest that was preventable was all right? That lying in a complaints meeting, either directly, by omission, or by not speaking up, was all right? That writing nothing in medical records, writing records that are not true, or altering medical records, was all right? That watching a patient deteriorate mentally and physically because of it was all right? If not, why won't one of you stand up and be an advocate for your patient? I can't make anyone who is involved in this speak to me. I can't make anyone who is involved apologise. I can't make anyone who was involved be truthful. But I can ask the questions. All that I can say and all that I can ask is please don't let this happen to another patient.